All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Irrational Confidence Podcast. It's college football playoff time. We're releasing our first ever college football poll. The real one's coming out on Tuesday, and we've tallied the votes. We've gotten the opinions of everybody and anybody. But the man who used his superstar status to get himself into the Georgia-Florida game, my co-host, Fresh, how you doing, buddy?
Haps, I'm doing great. I'm still shocked that we're basically at the end of October and we're releasing the first college football playoff poll here. The season's gone by way too fast, but now all the games from here on out are magnified and very much more important.
Yeah, Fresh. And the craziest thing with this weekend, normally we're doing a recap this weekend, but the Irrational Confidence Podcast is now an award-winning podcast. Take a look at the trophy. It's right here from this past weekend. Yes, we're doing philanthropy, folks. We did a trunk or treat for the Irrational Confidence Podcast and coming in first place. So we decided that our college football playoff ranking show, it couldn't be just Fresh and I. So we're bringing in our two co-hosts as well. The guy who is behind the board all the time, the guy who makes all the magic happen, our producer, Drew, and the guy who we call, in case we need any legal advice, our legal eagle, Kinger over there. How you doing, gentlemen?
Doing good. Glad to be
Looks like
here.
they're excited to be here.
See that. All right, so before we get rolling here tonight, I have the top 8. We have reached out to a variety of different viewers and asked them to send us in their top 8. I added them all together, averaged out a score. The team with the highest average ranking got the number 1 position. The gentlemen here have not seen these rankings. No one knows what the final ranking will be, so they will be reacting to the rankings as they come out. But before we get to that part, I wanted to let you guys give your current top 8. How do you see the field if you guys had a playoff vote at this time?
I'll let Kinger and Drew sort of go first, and then I'll sort of take up the back.
All right, I'll come out of the gate then. To no one's surprise, for those who know me, I have the first number 1 team being Michigan. If you look at Michigan, the thing that is missed by most is that the starters of that team have not played in the fourth quarter yet in a single game, more or less. The starting defense has scored more touchdowns than they've allowed. They've scored 4, they've allowed 3. They've beaten every team they've played by 25 points or more. They have a issue with their schedule. There are some other arguments against them, but I think in terms of domination, Michigan is the team that's been doing it so far this year. My number 2 is the Bulldogs. I don't think they are quite the team they were last year, but that's a pretty high bar to set. And they are still dominating, and they obviously played great at the game here in Jacksonville over the weekend. I think that was kind of a statement for them, especially without Bowers. And that was a question mark I had, is to see how they would do it without their stud. Number 3, I've got Ohio State. Ohio State has the 2 marquee wins. They do have 2 top 10 wins. I have some questions about McCord. I think there are some issues there with the team. But they're obviously winning, and they're winning well. So they have the number 3 spot for me. Number 4, I've got FSU. I think Jordan Travis has that team going in the right direction. I think they are going to have some issues. They've had some games where they've trailed going into the fourth quarter that were a little questionable, but they've also gotten it done. They've got the number 4 spot for me. Number 5, to no shock, I think is number 5 for most, is Washington. Penix Jr., he's fun to watch. He's got that West Coast style. I think that they are electric. I don't think they're a dominating team, but they seem to know how to get the ball done. And that's same thing with Oregon, who's my number 6. The head-to-head is really the only distinguishing factor between the two of them. They play so similarly. Oregon is a little more flaky, I think, this year, but they are extremely similar. Bo Nix is doing a great job there. But for the field goal at the end of the game, who knows? Maybe Oregon would have been 5 and Washington 6. Number 7, I've got Texas. The one loss, now with Oklahoma having their issues this weekend, it's a little shaky. But they look good. They don't really have many faults. So they've got the number 7 spot. And here's my curveball that I don't think most will agree with, but I'm gonna throw it out there. Number 8 for me, I'm giving it to Air Force. They have a weak schedule, they have issues, but they're 8-0 and they've gotten it done. The Colorado State game was a little wild. The penalties and what happened in the second half was pretty intense. But that's my kind of out of the box number 8, and I'll give honorable mention to Penn State because they would be the close number 9. And I would just say with Penn State, I don't think they're the team everyone thinks they are. From my point of view, I think they're a great team, but I don't think they are there yet. I think they will be in the next couple of years. They're getting there, but they still have some things to iron out. So that would be my top 8.5.
All right. Let's throw it over to Drew here. Drew, who is your top 8 teams?
Very similar to Ryan's, actually. So couple differences though. Right off the top, I have to have Georgia still slotted at number 1. Until they lose, I kind of going to give them that spot. I know they haven't looked at it maybe as dominant, and their schedule isn't as great, but until they lose, I'm going to keep them up there. Number 2, Michigan. Despite the cheating scandal, until that gets settled, I'm going to go ahead and let it ride out. So got them at number 2. Ohio State, number 3. Couple of back-to-back good wins there, so we'll see where they end up. Playing a little bit closer than I would like as a fan, but they're still winning. 4, Florida State, same kind of thing. Until they lose, they're going to be right in that slot. I don't think they'll lose, at least not until the playoff. Number 5, Washington. They've been playing really well. And then number 6, I had Oregon as well. Only lost being that close game to Washington. 7, Texas. Similar reasons to what Ryan stated. I did not go with quite the curveball at number 8. I just threw Alabama in there, figuring they'll be the next. Oklahoma would be an honorable mention. Obviously, they just lost to Kansas, but I don't have them dropping that far off. And then I also would have had Penn State pretty close there, even though I actually don't like Penn State. Well, for one, Big Ten rival, but also just, I don't know, they're good and they should beat a lot of teams, but they just let too many bad teams hang around and they flirt with that line too much for me to feel good about them long term. So those are my 8. Excited to see kind of what the fan vote was relative. Although I am starting to wonder because we had no conversation before this, and me and the Legal Eagle had quite a similar list.
Well, I think it's pretty interesting that we all have the same grouping of teams. Outside of Air Force, we're all in the same kind of mindset. My number 1 overall is Ohio State. The win at Notre Dame, beating Penn State handily. They've had some slow starts, but they've been able to put everybody away and beat and get their ranked wins with authority. So Kyle McCord still got questions there, but I think he gets more comfortable in the offense. And that defense is elite. That'll keep them in all their football games going forward. That team is definitely shown so far the body of work to be number 1. Georgia, number 2. I think we're still waiting for a consistent dominated wins. They dominated Kentucky, kind of struggled versus Vanderbilt, dominated Florida yesterday. What will they do versus Missouri, Ole Miss, and Tennessee coming down the stretch? And then Georgia Tech is actually playing some decent ball. So we'll see what they got to continue to keep moving there on making things happen. 3 for me is Florida State. They've had a couple close calls, but a couple solid wins there. They've actually beaten some ranked teams, and that's kind of where I have them at that 3. My number 4 team is Michigan. The only reason I have Michigan is because they've played absolutely nobody. UNLV is your best win of the season. It's been a trash schedule. You've dominated everybody, but we'll see what happens when they play Penn State and they play Ohio State down the stretch. If that ranking can obviously go up, but I want to see you guys play somebody and actually have the starters play in the fourth quarter. 5th, Washington. They've had some close calls. That win over Arizona, though, the close call over Arizona is actually looking better. But their struggles versus Stanford, their struggle versus Arizona State has me kind of worried, and they did survive Oregon. But because they beat Oregon, I have them ranked ahead of them. I have Oregon at 6. The Ducks are definitely in a prime spot. I got a feeling if the 2 of those squads can keep moving forward, they might be meeting for the Pac-12 title. That really could even decide a potential playoff spot if one is handily decided in one way or the other. I'm looking at 7. I have Oklahoma. They have one loss just like Texas, but they beat Texas. It was on the field. It happened. They decided it. They get the 7 spot. And I have Texas at 8. I think they're very good. It's going to be interesting to see how they move forward without Ewers, but they looked just fine this past Saturday. And there's tons of talent there for Texas, and like they might get that revenge matchup versus Oklahoma that could put them in that spot to, if the other things sort of shake out, they could be playing in essence, semifinal to get in. Just on the outside, Alabama 9 and Notre Dame at 10. Penn State, they have not looked fantastic. I've actually had them at 12. That offense did not show up for Ohio State, and I don't think they're going to show up versus Michigan either. I think they are just a 10-2 ball club that's going to benefit that, just the way they are. But that's kind of how my top 8 shaking out.
All right, folks. Well, before we get rolling into our official top 8 as we're going to release them, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right there up on the top of the channel. Guys, we are closing in on 1,000 subscribers. We want to hit it before Veterans Day. Hit that 1,000 subscribe button. Leave us the comment down below. Drop us your top 8 or tell us how wrong we are. And this is why I'm not leaving my top 8 in for today. So, without further ado, here is how the fans voted. Now, we reached out to a variety of different fans, similar to how the college football playoff went. We reached out to fans of teams from the SEC. We have fans from the University of Tennessee, University of Georgia. We have a Notre Dame fan. We have fans from the Big Ten, Ohio State. We have Alabama. We have Michigan. We have all over. So we tried to get a hodgepodge of different views here. There are 3 teams that received votes that are on the outside of the top 8 looking in. Those 3 teams in no particular order would be Oklahoma, Penn State, and Notre Dame. All 3 of those teams are on the outside looking in. So we're going to go from 8 to 1 here to create a little bit of drama. And the team that was ranked number 8 in our initial college football playoff poll here, a lot of our voters said the exact same thing. They got an opportunity to sneak back into the playoff, and that is the Alabama Crimson Tide at 7-1 right now. They said they got the big matchup this upcoming here soon with LSU. That's going to be a huge builder to their resume. And that if they beat LSU, that pretty much assures them a spot in the SEC title game where they would have a good chance to play the Georgia Bulldogs. They win that game, is pretty much a lock that Alabama would wind up in the college football playoff. Coming in at number 7 is the Texas Longhorns. Texas came in. They have one of the best quality wins on all of these teams' schedule. That win over Alabama in Tuscaloosa early on. They have looked dominant all year long here. And you take a look at this. They need to. One of our voters even said they need to navigate a few of these games without Quinn Ewers here. So I'll turn it over to you guys real quick. 2 blue bloods right at the back end of our top 8, number 7 and number 8. Give me just a quick reaction on Alabama and Texas being ranked 7 and 8.
Well, I would think Alabama being at 8 is interesting. They haven't looked Alabama-esque up to this point, but if they can keep playing defense and they survive LSU, it puts them in a decent spot to keep moving forward. Texas, I think they have everything in front of them. They just can't. They have to keep themselves focused one game at a time. And I think if they got a matchup with Oklahoma to decide the Big 12, they would win that ball game going away.
Yeah, I would agree. I think with Alabama is a different team now, and it's interesting to see how they'll bounce back without having the domination that they're used to. And then Texas, they've earned it with the injuries. It will be interesting. I think that they would have a tough time with Oklahoma, but I guess that's what the going into the final games mean. That's what they're there for.
Yep, agree with both you guys. And all I have to say is that's 2 for 2.
Yep. All right, let's go to our team that came in at number 6. It's the Oregon Ducks out of the Pac-12. A lot of people said Oregon really had a really great chance to beat Washington this year. They had a huge, huge win over Utah this past weekend. Oregon sitting at number 6 right now in the Pac-12. Guys, Any thoughts on Oregon sitting there at number 6? Should they be lower or higher than Texas and Alabama?
I think they're in the right spot. Basically, obviously, we've already gone through our own picks, and we all had them higher. With everything in front of them right now, they have a bunch of ranked teams in their schedule. It kind of builds them up. And if they had lost to Utah, I think that would have been maybe a killer to the program for this season. But they have a chance right now. Everything's in front of them, and Bo Nix is electric with the rest of that offense. Troy, Clifford, Franklin there can make plays. That Oregon Duck team could be in the conversation.
Yeah, I would agree all around. I mean, that's where I had them. I think that's where we all pretty much had them. Bo Nix can get it done. That's the right spot for them to be in.
That's where I had them. And also, I think just looking at it and the way things could play out, they're one of the teams that I think could sneak in there to be ending up as the second or third team. So maybe avoiding the number one team when it's all finalized for the playoff. Because Ohio State and Michigan, I don't know if they're going to let both in. So obviously, one of those might fall out. If they're able to beat Washington, I assume they'll end up having to play for the Pac-12 championship, and they could be sitting there pretty. Maybe being able to get to the second round and play for the national championship.
Yeah. So one of our voters even pointed out with them is that they are actually top 3 in the country at protecting the football. They just don't turn the ball over. Bo Nix done a great job, and Bucky Irving taking a good job. And my boy Clifford Troy Franklin over there as well. Love that kid. There's a lot of great stuff about the Oregon Ducks. So let's move to our number 5 team. And this one was kind of caught me off guard. I was a little shocked that this team would be sitting at number 5. I thought people would view their resume a little bit better than what it is. And that is the Washington Huskies. I know all of you guys had them on the top 5, outside the top 4 in the top at the 5 hole. But I thought people would really give more credit to that Oregon win. So let me ask all of you, what was your reason? I'll start with Drew here. What was your reason of leaving the Huskies out of the top 4?
History. And I know, I'm not necessarily using prior years as the total reasoning, but if I just go more so from the top, I had Georgia number 1 because they haven't lost in as long as they haven't, multiple years. Michigan number 2, they've been dominating this year. I know they lost in the playoff last year, but they've been dominating. Ohio State has played really well, and they've actually had multiple big premier wins with Notre Dame, Penn State, and Wisconsin. Florida State is undefeated. I know Washington's undefeated as well. And honestly, with their win over Oregon, maybe I am underselling them a little bit, but I just think we'll find out over the coming weeks whether we have them right or if they should be on the rise. Maybe it's some of that West Coast, East Coast bias. I don't know, but for whatever reason, I just feel like Florida State deserves to be ahead of them.
Daniel, what was your reasoning to keep them out of the top 4?
Uh, Sort of similar. I think that 5 is the right spot for them in just what they produced. And I would also say that the West Coast, East Coast thing is an important distinction. And I don't really even think it's a bias necessarily. You could call it that, but it's a different style of play. And right or wrong, for a team from the West Coast with that style of play to break into the top 4, they have to be lights out, dominating, not winning by a field goal. That explosive play with lack of a stellar defense. Their defense is good, don't get me wrong, but they are offense, fast, speed, quick. They don't have the power and the boa constrictor nature that we see in teams like Michigan, Georgia, Ohio State. FSU's getting there. So they're right where they should be. They're 5. They need to step on the gas if they want to get into that top 4.
Fresh?
I mean, defensively, I've seen Washington has not played at the level I wanted them to play this year. They've kind of strolled. And that Stanford game and the Arizona State game where they have squeaked by, they did not put their foot down, that's a big deciding factor. If you want to be an elite team against the bottom dweller schools like those, you've got to put them away early. And letting them hang around, letting them potentially get you, that just has a warning sign. We've like Oklahoma, they had some close calls. They finally got taken out. There's times where the signs are there, and eventually, if you don't play crisp every single game out, if you don't have the fortitude to get you there, you're going to get caught. It's kind of worried because their schedule's going to get tougher from here on out. And the Apple Cup, Washington State, Cam Ward at the very end of the year, they're going to have nothing else to play for. They're going to be kind of pissed because Washington's leaving anyway and leaving them straighted. They're going to lay it all out there in the last game of the year. It might be the last time they actually play. So there are a lot of pit holes coming up for the Huskies, and they have to play much better offensively and defensively as a collective unit to be able to guide this this rest of this trip. USC right now, they have some serious defensive issues, but you got a feeling they're a little irritated about the way their season's kind of gone. They get the Huskies this week in LA. That could be a shootout, and if the Huskies don't show up defensively, Caleb Williams could get them. So just keeping them there, yeah, you beat Oregon, you have that one win, but you got to navigate the rest of the schedule, and do they have that camaraderie and that focus to get it done? I'm not sure yet.
Yeah, the weird thing to me is that we have said that the Pac-12 is probably the best conference top to bottom, and Washington is clearly the best team. It would be hard in years past that when we say the SEC or the Big Ten was the best conference in whatever given year, it'd be hard to leave out the best team out of the best conference. That's where I kind of got a little bit surprised. So let's go to our top four here. Our number 4 team, there was more number 4 votes for them. They would be traveling to the Bayou to play in the Sugar Bowl in the first one. They would be matched up against the number 1 team, and that is the University of Michigan, the Wolverines, coming in our fan vote at number 4. We know what Kinger thinks. Too high, too low on that. But let me give you this. Would it shock you that more than half of our voters had the Wolverines ranked at the number 4 spot?
No. And the reason I would say that is twofold. One, they have had a weak schedule. Some people don't look past that, and that's respectable. That's a significant thing to deal with. I would argue that the way that they have managed that schedule is indicative of them being higher than that, because they have, with their starters out for a third to half the game, won handily without any issues. Second, and this is where I'll take a slight curve off the beaten path and say that what the NCAA has done this season and how they're handling this sign stealing thing is morally repugnant. They are violating their own code of ethics in releasing this information. And I won't go too deep into it. I would just say that they should probably read Article 1, Rule 1, Article 11, their bylaws as to what's going on at Michigan right now. And the court of public opinion is going to affect how people see them in the rankings as well.
A lot of our voters brought up the fact of that they still have their 2 tough. The reason they have them at 4, and multiple voters said this: their 2 toughest tests await them.
That's true.
Until they take their 2 toughest tests, every other team above them they felt had a tougher test that they've already faced. So we'll find out who they will face here in a moment. But the number 3 team, and this was very, very close. These people, they were either number 3 almost on every single poll. A couple people have them in at number 2. A couple of 1 or 2 have them at number 4. And that's the Florida State Seminoles. Big time win versus LSU. They will be traveling to the Rose Bowl to play in that second playoff game right there. Mainly because, remember how the committee does it, they use geography to send teams to the closest location because you want that least amount of travel available to them. So Florida State is going number 3 there. They would be in Pasadena for that first game. I think that's a great spot for them. And I'll give you guys, because we know these were going to be probably the 2 top teams of who winds up being number 1 and number 2 in the first initial poll. And the team that was most hotly debated, they received a ranking from every single spot. The number 2 team in the country that would be going to Pasadena is the Ohio State Buckeyes. They would get the number 2 spot to play Florida State, meaning that the Georgia Bulldogs would be the number 1 team in the country. What a lot of our voters said and this is a common factor. UGA stays number one until with back-to-back national champions. Georgia is progressing as a team. Can't be the champ until you beat the champ. They're one of the top teams in the country on third down conversions, and they're still the king. Still, someone knocks them off. Now, a lot of voters said with Georgia, their strength of schedule is absolute garbage, but they give them a lot of credit for having those two back-to-back national titles. So we take a look at these matchups here. Guys, what do you think? College football matchups. If that was the 4-team matchup, what are you thinking?
Well, first off, I'm laughing at the strength of schedule because they're going to have more ranked opponents on their schedule than Ohio State or Michigan or Florida State when it's all said and done. So that's the irony of the whole thing about strength of schedule. But I think it's going to be an exciting matchup. You get Michigan, Georgia replay from 2 years ago in the first semifinal. We'll get the chance to put Michigan's Georgia period practice period to the test. But then an amazing Florida State offense versus an amazing Ohio State defense out in the Rose Bowl. That could be an electric ball game. Marvin Harrison Jr., Jordan Travis, the whole host of receivers for Florida State. I think that would be an amazing matchup, and that's definitely obviously going to have everyone's eyes on it. But those 4 teams getting after it in any way combination would be a lot of fun.
Joan?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be a rematch with Georgia this year between Michigan and Georgia would be fantastic. I would love to see that for no other reason than just to see a fantastic game. I am a little interested in the confidence in Florida State from some people. I have them in my top 4. They deserve to be there. But that game against Boston College, that's not a top 4 performance. That was close. Duke the first half. I mean, they're a great game. They're a great team, but they're not all there yet. I think Ohio State would wax the floor with Florida State, frankly. It would be a great game. It would be electric. It would be. I just think that I know the outcome of that game better than I would know the outcome of Michigan versus Georgia.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. I mean, obviously, everyone always has a lean. So I think the way things have been going, it would be a good game. If Bowers is healthy, I would like Georgia. If he's not healthy, maybe I would lean Michigan. I do agree Ohio State should win easily against Florida State. Maybe easily is not quite the right term, but I just think they're the better team. But just random sidebar question, I guess, related to that. If hypothetically situations played out and you did end up with Ohio State and Michigan both in the playoff, do you think there's ever a scenario, regardless of kind of where all the top 4 teams end up standing, but just I feel like they're never going to play in the first round because they won't want them to play in back-to-back weeks. And I just think, what do you guys think about that and how that impacts other schools?
Oh, that's no doubt. They would manipulate it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't. If you're one of the 4, you're in the playoff. You're gonna have to play good teams anyway. You're just gonna be prepared for the gauntlet game, and wherever it sets you up. You got to figure it out and go play them. Because if you're good enough and they're good enough, you might have played them in the championship. So I think they're going to do whatever they can to keep those conference opponents from playing back to back. Now, let's just say if it was 2-3 years from now, and they do the redo of the Big Ten schedule, and they have Ohio State, Michigan play opening week of the year, week 1. And because there's no more divisions in the conference championship game, and they met in the conference title game, would they still do the same thing? Who knows? It's going to be. There's always been a personal opinion manipulation for TV and for regionals as well. There's always something going on in that back room for who's in the committee.
Agreed, especially with this coming to a close. The new system that we're going to be heading into is going to detract so much from the value of regular season play for the elite teams. The game, Michigan versus Ohio State, is going to frankly lose a lot of its luster, which is sad from my perspective. But I don't think they would allow back-to-back in this final kind of down the ramp into the new system we have coming towards us. I don't think they'd let that happen.
I mean, we've seen it in the NFL where a team plays last week of the regular season, and it's set to play the wild card round the next week. So they basically just camp it out. They play backups. They sort of get through, hope they don't get hurt, and then the real game gets played, the next week. And I just don't see them wanting to have to do that because it's already going to be a devalued regular season game. Then you totally just milk it out by having it just an exhibition.
I think that there's a possibility with this. I think Drew brings up a good point. I'll put it this way to you. Georgia loses within any time in the next 4 weeks, leading into the SEC title game. Georgia loses, Ohio State moves into the pole position. Now, the debate's going to be whether or not where they're going to make in the conversation is whether Florida State or Ohio State deserves to be in number one. Let's just say if Ohio State were to win out and they beat Michigan, but Georgia loses in the SEC title game, the Pac-12 beats itself up, the Big 12 beats itself up, so there's only 2 teams. It depends on who would come. Ohio State would have to move into the pole position, and Michigan coming in at number 4. That would be the only way I could see it happening. But other than that, I agree with you guys. But I could see it happening if they come in at the 4 spot.
I could see it actually the opposite real quick, though. It's a good point because if Georgia were to lose, Michigan moves into the 1 spot. Ohio State loses to Michigan, yet still comes in at number 4. You'd have the same scenario, arguably.
Right. Well, see, in our poll right now, Michigan's sitting behind Florida State.
Oh,
That's
well,
why I'm
brain.
going off of our ranking.
I gotcha.
Yeah. All right. One last question for you guys before we wrap up here and sign off here. Let's take a look at that 5 through 8 matchups as well. And there's a couple different combinations. This interesting piece talking about rematches. Let's say that this is how it finally works out. Would you rather see the rematch between Oregon and Washington and Alabama and Texas? Those games get 2 amazing regular season games this year. Or you can have Washington versus Alabama, Oregon versus Texas, or Oregon versus Alabama, Washington versus Texas. So there's your combination. I'll turn it over to you guys. Which one, if this was our top 8, which matchup would you want to see? Tough question.
The Oregon Alabama is intriguing because Dan Lanning coached for Nick Saban. It'd be like, at one point in his career, it'd be an interesting little scenario there. But I think the most amazing one would be another Washington-Oregon matchup because it's 2 years in a row that Washington's already beaten Oregon in the regular season. We might get them in the Pac-12 title game, but can Dan Lanning actually make adjustments? Because that team is talented enough. Can they make adjustments to get a win? Because that's going to be another shootout where it can be 45-42, just going back and forth like a video game.
I think I would probably I would agree with Fresh. That would be amazing to see again. But I think it would be fascinating to see Alabama, Oregon. Just the way those 2 teams set up right now would be interesting. I would vote for that.
I would lean Washington against Alabama, purely because I'm curious to see where they stand outside of things. So going back to, you questioned how you could say like the Pac-12 is the best conference and the best team in it. They're not in the top 4. And then part of it is like the tough part of their schedules coming up and everything. And so it's hard to say because in a couple of weeks, like right now we have Oregon sitting right behind Washington and they had the great game against each other. Well, what if Washington drops 2 games the rest of the season, like in the next 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden Oregon doesn't look so hot either, and then so do those 2 fall behind Texas and Alabama and potentially some others? So I just think time will tell with all of it, but I think I would like to see Washington against Alabama only because in recent years I feel like we've seen Oregon go up against some SEC teams and some Big Ten teams, and it hasn't gone so well. I'd like to see if a different Pac-12 team could compete.
Yeah. And neither one of these, Texas and Alabama, are not set to play, even though both will be in the SEC in 24. Alabama's got Oklahoma next year, not Texas. but Washington and Oregon are scheduled to play in 2024 when they both join the Big Ten next year. So interesting thing that you see how these are all ranking together and that there's a future involving those. One last question. This again, we'll sign off here. Group of 5 right now. You got 2 major undefeated with Liberty and Air Force. And then you got Tulane kind of hanging out back there. Who's your group of 5 team would you want to keep your eye on?
Air Force, without a doubt, they would beat the trash out of Liberty. Liberty has not played anyone truly impressive. The Air Force Falcons, even with their backup quarterback, would go in there and absolutely annihilate them. It would not even be a contest.
I would agree with Fresh.
They would extinguish the flame with their own jet bursts.
I think Air Force would be a dominating force there as well. But I mean, I already played my hand there, having Air Force in at 8.
Yeah, Air Force. I agree.
All right, folks. Well, this is our college football playoff prediction show. I know the real one's going to come out on Tuesday, so make sure you lock in. Fresh and I will be back with another preview. We're previewing week number 10. There are some amazing games as we barrel quickly to rivalry week. We're in the last month of the season, so make sure you're locked in. And the best way to be locked in,
10.
It's week 10. So make sure you hit that subscribe button because then you'll never miss an episode when we drop there. 1,000 subscribers. We're hitting that mark in this upcoming week. I guarantee it. And make sure you're following us on social media. Interact with us. Visit SpinnableSports.com because the Irrational Confidence Podcast is part of SpinnableSports.com. Special thanks to our producer, Drew, who joined us today. He's the man behind the board. He's the one who makes all the magic happen. So special thanks to him. And Fresh, that's all I got this week.
This past week is another exciting one. This is just the beginning. Now the stretch run is here. Who's going to choke in the playoff stretch to make the Final Four? Who's got the fortitude to keep plowing ahead? We'll see. And every week's going to be more chaos as we go forward. And I can't wait. And with that, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. And bye, y'all.